Hi.
Hello.
Here we are
Hello,
again.
hello.
Everyone's coming in.
Yes.
Oh, flyers everywhere.
Welcome to part 2 of Alfred the Great. Shall I do the thing before
It's
we
been a
do the
labour of
thing?
love this week. It really, really has.
Yes, yes. I'm slightly croaky. I'm not ill. The reason why I sound like this is because I think spring is coming, or at least the plants think spring is coming, and so they've spaffed their pollen into the air, and it's attacking every orifice of my face. So that's why I sound like this.
Every mucous membrane.
My mucous membranes, every one of them is
Everyone-
furious at all times. So this is
Oh.
why I sound like I've been operating a special phone line. But hey,
Jump on that while you've got
hey,
it.
do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? In for a penny, in for a pound.
Oh.
Welcome, friends. I should probably have done this before I went into that whole riff about orifices and spaffing, but there we are. Welcome to History After Dark. Welcome to History After Dark, friends. We called it that because it was dark when we made it, as it is now. It also fits because on our other platforms, we are veritable choir girls. We are PG-13 at all times. You would never, unless you really annoy Philippa, in which case you might get a spicy response. So this is where we come to let our freak flags fly, where we like to indulge in four-letter expletives, smut, innuendo, general filth. With that being said, if you are in an open plan office with a judgmental boss, put a headphone in. If you are in a car, a kitchen, a living room with a small child, this child is a problem. We call this child Timmy. He is a problem. The mug says it. Timmy's a dobber. Timmy does not know that snitches get stitches. Timmy is the kind of child that hears one depraved thing one time, locks it away in his deviant mind palace, takes it into school with him, and repeats it in front of his teacher. In my head, she's Miss Honey from Matilda. Now, she does not watch History After Dark because she is pure as the driven. And so she breaks the first cardinal rule of History After Dark, which is if you don't know what it means, it's not for you. Don't Google it. She Googles it, you get a phone call, you've got to go up there and you've got to explain why Timmy knows this unspeakably depraved thing. And on top of that, you're now paying for 12 weeks of therapy because she's in the fetal position having a cry. Put a headphone in. Alternatively, you can always watch them on the playback here on the YouTubes. It is, of course, always worth watching us live because there was one occasion where we said something so frankly unspeakable, borderline illegal, that it had to be yeeted into the sun. That's not happened since, which means one of three things. Either we have got better behaved, unlikely.
I'm not the other way round.
It's almost certainly the way. The other option is we are due another incident very soon, possible. Most likely, I think, is that we've been doing this for so long that now the bar for us is in hell. So we just, things that would not have passed muster 6 months ago, we're now, that's probably fine. Let's see if we're a watch list, shall we? So those
Demonetized again? No idea why.
Hello, friends. Come on in. Please do search my hard drive. Continuing on. We have said, don't Google it if you don't know what it means. It's not for you. We hope that you're all adults. Lucas, go to bed. So we are going to tell you what to do. But if you want to make this into a drinking game, we will not approve this message. This will never be medical or legal advice. Please don't sue. Our final rule is, as you will have noticed, that is a beautifully handcrafted little heart, handcrafted disclaimer. There we go. If at any point we see either in our comments here or on our individual comments somebody going, I really enjoy History After Dark. The history is very interesting, but must you ladies swear so much? It's very unladylike. We know what you're doing. And we aren't going to pin that comment or draw attention to it. Look, if you want to be humiliated and publicly shamed because that's your kink, then boo-boo, you do you. There are plenty of basement dominatrixes that will happily stand on your bollocks for a handsome fee, but you aren't paying us for that, and we've not consented, and kink without consent is an absolute no-go. That's the disclaimer. This is History After Dark. Let's get into part 2 of Alfred the Great.
Alfred the Great. So, Kat, previously on Had.
Yes, right. Previously on Had. We did do a whole hour And I'm going to give you a rundown before I go into my second part. So here's what we covered. Alfred the Great was very, very great. Everybody loved Alfred. His mummy loved him the best. His teachers loved him the best. The country loved him the best. He was very, very good at learning poems and doing his reading. He was also friends with the Pope, did lots of traveling to the Pope. He was very, very good at fighting. Even when he lost, he was still the best at fighting. He could convert people to Christianity and make them behave, even when they didn't behave. He made a whole system of burghs, which was very, very good because it meant that the naughty Vikings couldn't come and smash people in the face. That's how he got
to. Every day, anyway. Yeah.
Now and then.
Only sometimes, not always. That is where we got to. Shano, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we are pleased that you enjoy our lack of diplomacy. It will not change. This is where we come to have no filter.
We enjoy it. We actually created it just genuinely for that reason.
For this reason. We were all straight up done with smiling in the right places.
Yeah. Other things that you should know about Alfred that we talked about last time that's very, very important is that he is a very large, meaty boy. He's the meatiest of the boys. What else about him? Oh, yes, bum grapes.
Oh, yes.
I put in the comments last seen it, Alfred the Grapes.
There's a water bottle is being filled up. So if you hear that, I've not pissed myself. Don't worry.
Not this time.
We're just having to fill up a water bottle.
Yeah, he was a shagger, and instead of just not shagging, he asked God for some help in keeping
to not shag.
Shagging, and so God sent him piles. So,
yes, not impotence. Ask
no, did that actually stop him? That's the question.
Well, I mean, what's he doing? How's he having sex? How bad were they?
That's
how are having sex?
I don't know. Enough that he asked for God to please, give him something different, not get rid of them, but something different. So he still couldn't trust himself, regardless, even after years of trying to ride a horse with hemorrhoids.
It's not working, is it?
So he then got some sort of stomach pains that dogged him for the rest of his life. So thanks for God. That's it. I mean, he did what he asked.
He ended up with the roaring shits.
Did he have both?
Did one
went away?
Got the other one right. Okay.
Not at the same time.
Jolsey would have gone with leprosy. It's an interesting choice.
I mean, if one of the
things had fallen off, he wouldn't have been a shagger then, would he?
No, I think he needed. I don't think he really wanted to not. He would just wanted his lusts tapered somewhat, as opposed to obliterated, or
What was it Edward IV said to Barnaby? Tennis and vigorous Bible study.
Yeah, Edward VI said to Barnaby Fitzpatrick.
Vigorous Bible study.
Yeah, that's it.
God,
he should have been doing.
What an unpleasant little prig he was. Oh my gosh, Deborah, Alfred, the hemorrhoidal horseman.
There's a title for a new biography.
I think that must have hurt a lot. Or like I said last week, he must have had lots of hides or something on his saddle to cushion. Or maybe they actually invented the O cushion. Those horrible.
That's why it was invented.
Yeah. Alfred is the inventor of the O cushion. Whatever they're supposed donut. What do they call them? I don't know. I've never needed one. Donut cushion. Anyway, whatever.
One of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're a fanny fixer. That's what it is. Fanny, of course, means something quite different in the UK to what it means in the US. I meant the UK version.
The same
yes, yes.
But both works in this context. So that's where we left off. I'm going to hop into what comes next.
Buffer. Sorry.
What's that?
Shano, bum buffer.
That sounds like someone's polishing him.
No, let's Google it. Don't Google it.
So this last time I focused on basically the battley bits. now we're going to be looking at the other bits that made the successful battley bits possible. We are talking about the making of England and the shaping of an idea of England. And this is going to lead into what Catherine's talking about, which is the legacy of Alfred and why he is remembered and perhaps why he earned, if we think he did, the moniker the Great. So we talked about this system of burgle hidage last time that really revolutionized the way that his lands could defend themselves against onslaught. But of course, what was also required was the diplomacy and political networking that meant that this burgle system, this hidage, had support both from within and without. So, for example, one thing that Alfred did, which has been and continues to be the way in which medieval and early modern and beyond monarchs and rulers fortified their holdings and secured them, which is marrying off their daughters in profitable fashions. So he marries his daughter to Ethelred, who at the time is taking hold of getting control of the Mercian kingdom in the state it was in the 880s. And it's about bringing that under control and trying to regain it and all that kind of stuff. With Mercia, it does end up being the thing that holds London. And while London doesn't have the prominence that it will eventually have, it is, of course, still an important city. The River Thames is an important way of moving things. So control of that space is very useful. The other thing that Alfred does is that he starts trying to forge alliances and manages to create this web of alliances with the kings of what is called Wales, but perhaps more appropriately, Cymru. So he manages to convince them to come into alliance with him. He also tries to make similar overtures to individuals in the north, although albeit with less success. It's around this time, around the time of him making these successful alliances and trying to create other ones, that we start hearing or reading rather texts like the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle refer to all Anglican or Anglesen except what was under the subjugation of the Danes submitted to him. The charters that he's putting out refer to him as the king of the Anglo-Saxons. But that word, Angelsin, is really important. The notion of Angelorum, or an English people that somebody could be ruler over, when we consider what we looked at last time, those very distinct but ever-shifting kingdoms, this notion itself it's being documented, and that Alfred is being presented as a ruler of the Christians of the island of Britain. So you're having this national identity that is connected by faith. The other thing that, of course, supports a successful military administration, a military setup, is the administration governmentally, the household. So that burgle hidage that we talked about as being so effective in defending parts of England has the flip side that it requires an almost quasi or proto-bureaucratic level of engagement and investigation, because within those spaces and within the land that is encompassed by those different burghs, what you're going to look for is the support that can be offered from the inhabitants of the area. So that requires knowing what everybody has and what they can present to you. So we are talking, before Doomsday Book, in some ways almost an accounting of what the available resources are. It's not perfect at this time. We perhaps wouldn't see it as being comprehensive, but the attempt is clearly being made. The other thing that Alfred does, and in this, and in how he does it, in this part, the records are somewhat spottier. Some of Alfred's doings have really, really good records. Other bits of Alfred's doings have less good records. So, for example, we are informed that in Alfred's will, there are £2,000 of silver that can be distributed. Now, that is not what Alfred is worth. That is, in effect, I mean, saying loose change is not the right term. That is the movable. That is the available. That's being distributed. This is apparently 25 times the size of the biggest hoard, Anglo-Saxon hoard, known from that period. £2,000 of silver that he has accumulated. We're not sure how he does it. Is he essentially wringing money out of the Scandinavians that he encounters? Is he, on top of that, making use of the various mines in the southwestern parts of England, those around that Burgle Hidage, is part of what that's providing, that mining stuff that was so attractive to the Romans? Is it coming from rents? Is he extracting money for protecting people from Vikings? We're not sure. It could be any and or all of those things in various amounts. What is clear is that he manages to amass a fortune. And as we know, money is power. Power brings money. The things flip back and forth. He is also a lawmaker. He writes these law texts. They come with a preface. The preface announces that these laws are going to be traditional. Reference is made to these laws being inspired by something pre-existing. Laws known in Kent and in Mercia. There is a notion here of a combining of these legal understandings, a sort of parity between places like Kent and Mercia, bringing them almost under one. These are now, or what is implied is these are the laws of the Anglesyn, of Angelorum. They are also a legal system that is explicitly intertwined with and inspired by religious texts, the text of the Christian Bible. And through this divinely inspired legal text, there is the implication presented that those who follow it, the Angelorum, are therefore behaving as a chosen people. That England, Angelorum, the English people, are part of this almost promised land, that their obedience to the laws made by Alfred is in equivalent an obedience to God. So what we might say, we talk about this notion of divine right of kings as something much later. But to me, there is a slight blurring occurring here. I'm prepared to debate that. I don't think it's clear cut, but I think in being a lawmaker who presents your laws as being divinely inspired, and you being the font of those laws, and part of those laws expressly being about oaths and pledges, I think that in binding yourself to Alfred and his laws, and also binding yourself to God's will and judgment, there's something happening there. As I said, there is within this notion of oath and pledge. When oaths and pledges become part of the legal system, breaking oaths and pledges, breaking the law of God, breaking promises to your liege lord, your monarch, they become a perjury. Those that then can become a treason. And we start to get in here, in these texts, though, the notion of felonious or felony crimes. And felony crimes are crimes that are in effect treasonous and thus carry that ultimate penalty. So those sorts of things all get, I suppose, tied up together, for better or for worse. What Alfred also does is he is explicit in the fact that the level of literacy and the access to and obtaining of wisdom is not where he wants it to be. He tells his judicial officers that they must remedy their shortcomings in their literacy and their wisdom. This goes beyond the learning of the law. This is about a general, almost, I think, we sort of think about the humanist Renaissance, but there's something very similar happening with Alfred, that this is a learning that is not just about the laws that you have to work to. This is an understanding, a wisdom that is spiritual, divinely ordained, that it's also cultural. It's about the beauty of the world. It's about understanding those things, the divine cultural capital and the world as we know it. So and the fear being, Alfred points out, is that if the level of knowledge and the obtaining of wisdom is allowed to degrade further, he is worried that the people of his land will lose the capacity to read the texts that will show them what God wants for them. If they forget what is expected of them, they will in effect damage all the progress that could possibly be made. Alfred appears very clear that creating these spaces of learning and essentially privileging learning is of equal value to the future of his kingship, of his nation, as the building of those Burgle heidages, of the building of forts, that there is a fort of the mind that also needs to be supported. He is taking influence from Charlemagne and looking to build essentially a coterie of scholars. Where he differs, though, from Charlemagne is that he is taking these school spaces at court rather than making it purely ecclesiastical. There's also a notion that it shouldn't just be the children of the nobility that are schooled, but also children who are of, the lower orders. He talks about schooling being made, first of all, in the vernacular, so that the foundations to then go on and learn Latin could be laid down for them. And of course, the knock-on effect of this is where I'm going to stop and leave the path clear for Catherine, because when she's talking about legacy, so much what we know about Alfred comes from the texts that are produced. And one of the very clear outcomes from Alfred privileging education the way that he does is that it leads to a development and outpouring of the very literature that builds his legacy. So that's what I have for you. I've gone on rather longer than I expected. I apologise. I'm going to pause there, though, and take a sip.
The wonderful Alfred. He's up until this point, he's still fairly great, isn't he? He's still quite great at the moment. In the meantime, though, as we didn't have a visit from the widows last week, I think it might be time. Are we ready? Summon them. Summon the widows.
Oh,
they're en route.
Hold on.
I'm still separating my layers, Philippa. Yeah. You're all right.
Oh, good. Okay. There you go. I'm here.
Here we are. Here we go. Hang on. Just got to boot it up on ye olde worldy MacBook.
By the way, if you can hear any sort of snoring, it's the dog. It's not me.
Hasn't dropped up.
Look at the papa.
He's there.
Aww.
He's behind my name badge, but he's there having a lie down. He's probably going to freak out if he sees me looking like this.
Right. Dear widows.
Yes.
My great aunt recently passed after a long illness.
Oh.
And since I was the only niece who actually visited, she left all of her considerable assets to me.
Well done.
I now have a fortune big enough to keep me in comfort for my whole lifetime and several more after. The problem in this fortune seems to have attracted some uncomfortable amount of attention. I can't go to a single ball or dinner party without some fortune hunter declaring his undying love for me, or some busybody hostess insisting I sit next to her oh so charming son. How do I make it clear to these people I am not looking for a husband, so they'll leave me alone to read my novels and eat bonbons in peace? Signed, Harried and Henpecked Heiress.
Didn't we have a very, very similar one last time? I'm trying to remember then what
There was an inheritance problem last time where the answer was poison everybody.
Of course.
Do you know what? I'm going to go outside of the box here. My darling, what you need is you need to find a unmarried homosexual man. And the reason for saying that is that I'm assuming in the time in which you're living, that would be something that would cause scandal for him. If you do not wish to have the life and the duties of a married lady, the companionship could be fabulous. It could be a very useful thing for both of you. You could be his beard and he could be your companion. No one's going to bother you about, he's not going to come knocking on your door in the wee small hours looking for his feet to be warmed. That's a euphemism. I think your answer is a homosexual man.
Just got to find one now.
Yes.
It can't be that difficult, surely.
No, depending on what time you're in, love, go to Molly House.
You'd want. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, the other thing you could do is find a very elderly, not long till, gentleman who is also very minted. So nobody can accuse you of trying to go after him to steal his money because you are just as rich, if not more rich than him. Clearly, he's going to mump it not long into this equation. And then you can look dead nice because you can give all his money away because you don't need it. But you are betrothed to probably somebody who has quite high status, a good circle of influence because of their advancing years. And then people might leave you alone then as well.
Yes.
Well, you could do what Elizabeth says and basically tell them to fuck off.
Yes.
I mean, start the conversation with "Listen here, fucker." Yes, that will also generally. And then if you do that enough, doesn't matter how much money you got.
Just become a cantankerous cow bag that no one wants to go anywhere.
And really nice. You get someone with a shaming kink.
Well, what
you might enjoy being told to fuck off on a regular basis.
Yeah,
and they might pay you even more money.
There is another option, of course. You could go with hardcore bitch,
but only when they bring up that subject. So you could be nice as pie the rest of the time.
Yeah. Or you could be quietly deranged, which I think is advice I've given before. Just, if they start talking about marriage, just start gently barking.
Someone's put Bess Hardwick.
or if they bring it up, do some kind of shocked. You did what with the dog? I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. If it's modern day, if they start pursuing you, I'm going to say this out loud. I'm going to say this out loud. If they start pursuing you, say, that's all well and good. But just so you know, I have very particular tastes. Have you ever seen Two Girls, One Cup?
Don't Google that.
Do not Google that.
Man alive. Yeah, but then just say the sort of my luck would be, right, that he would say, oh, that's great, because I've got side pieces into that as well, and she's been looking for somebody to join her. That's what happened to me.
At that point,
you don't
your
want
only answer is poison. At that point,
In
you've got
the
to
cup.
double down.
knock 'em out.
In the cup.
That's some inheritance powder right there, babe. Right there.
Inheritance powder. I mean, I suppose if she's being invited to a lot of dinner parties, she's got the money to bribe enough of the staff. You could start eliminating.
Oh, I wondered
some
what
of
you were
these
talking about.
people.
Invited dinner parties. I thought you meant the other girl. I was like,
Oh no. Now she's saying she goes to dinner parties. And
oh
she's
right,
being-
okay. I'm with you
being
now.
harassed.
I'm with you now.
So perhaps she knows that you could bribe enough of the staff to, and then maybe if these people start mysteriously dying after they've had conversations with you, it might put some of the others off.
Correct. Like
Oh
you're an
no,
albatross.
Shano, I looked it up. Look, we warn you, mate.
Look, it's
You are given
look, I'm
plenty
taking
of warning.
Shano. It's the first rule of History After Dark.
Oh dear. But yeah.
It's rule number 1.
For a reason. For a reason.
So I think we've given you quite a few options there. To be
There you
fair.
go. Do tell us which one you pick.
Yes. Someone further up, but is this based on a real person? Not that we're aware of, but if
But
it
looking
is,
her
the
bit
person who
is.
sent
You're
this
going to
in, I
bold.
believe is in the comments. So if they would like to, if it is them or somebody else they know, then please.
Yeah. Do you live in
Josie,
Bridgerton? What's going on here?
Josie, I
Josie,
started to look something up and I had to back out slowly and clear my cache and pray. We're back to this again.
Backing out slowly.
Right, go. God.
Quite enough of that. Smut.
Quite enough of that
Quite
nonsense
enough of that smut.
for 1 week. Oh, Shano, mate, that was a.
You'll never unsee that.
Fail.
You'll never unsee it. It will
No.
be burned in. Because trust me,
Your
I got
retina.
sent that when I was about 23, and I opened the message and I couldn't look away, and it burnt into my fucking retinas. You'll never be able to unsee it.
What a terrible day to have eyes.
What a fucking terrible day to have eyes. Awful.
And hearing and the internet and everything, really.
And a smartphone. I was like, I am on the 5th floor. This shit is about to go out the window. No pun intended with this shit.
Oh.
Stop.
I wish I'd brought it up now. I feel
That
unwell.
gives us all something in common.
I feel unwell. I'm sorry.
Violated.
I've violated
Josie, I
myself.
remember the early days of the internet when we were just looking up anything.
Yeah.
No. Manda, don't mention blue waffle.
Oh no.
No.
No. Right.
Right.
It's
Move
time
on.
to
Move on. Abort mission.
Shall we move on?
Abort.
Abort mission.
Okay. So this has been an absolute labour of love. Okay. So initially what I'm going to do to kind of help build up this picture of Alfred's legacy is to take through a little bit of a timeline still, because it will build up what he did and how he did it, to see the picture of the kingdom and that he left at the end, really. Horses and chicks, sheeps and dudes. That's a lot of lists, Jules.
In one video.
I mean, a good time was had by all. All right. So, as obviously it's been mentioned, he was king of Wessex around the time of all the major Viking raids, and the other kingdoms, though, are starting to fall. And so he has this big task, is that he is going to have to deal with this. And I think most of us know that Alfred's vision was a united England. So he had to sort of start to look at all these things in the way that he could start to build this dream and put everything together. So he sets the stage then for what is going to become initially England and then in the end Britain, and how he goes about this is what sort of pretty much shapes his legacy, in my opinion. You might not agree. If you do, I don't want to hear it, quite frankly. I'm not interested at this point after the week I've
Not up for debating.
I'm over it. Just don't. Anyway, so yes, but by the time of his death, Wessex has become powerful enough to have the other kingdoms either, you know, almost with him, or at the very least holding some of his allegiance, which is no mean feat, quite frankly. And so he's able to hold some sort of control over putting all this together. And this makes it a lot harder for the Vikings to continue to have the success, or however you want to term it, that they've had. So already, therefore, he has started to succeed where other kings haven't been able to. He's looking, as the others have touched on, to start to bring this Viking threat underneath his control a little bit more. So he wanted really to try and increase, I say, a lot of the things that we touched on, to increase literacy. And here we see a very big part of his legacy, which is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. And this recorded the events, mostly obviously in Wessex, but also of other parts of the kingdoms as well. So to start with, it was very, very sparse. It was just kind of, in this year, this happens. It was like the briefest of brief things. The underlying Cliff Notes version had nothing on this. But over time, it became a lot more detailed and a lot more involved. And obviously there was a huge amount of propaganda involved in this, because it was mostly written by him. So, you know, it gives us something to start to build on, really. And we'll talk again about sort of the literacy that this brought with it as well. Now, Asa, Philippa talked about Asa last week. He's our other great source of information about Alfred. But again, this is very important. And I'll pop back to him in a moment, just to see how we can start to build all this information that we didn't have in the same volume that we had previously, or in the same detail. And that allows us to put together a better picture of what's going on with him. However, it didn't survive, did it, Asa's original manuscript? In 1731, there was a big fire in the Cotton Library. And so there's some guy called Bishop Parker had made a copy. But then again, did he add to it? Did he take away from it? How much of this original document that we have? So it's all these factors that layer on when we're building this picture of Alfred. We have to, as we always have to, think about these factors, and so how much accuracy we have. So we just need to bear all these things in mind. So he wants to be seen as this person that unites the country. But as Philippa mentioned last week, would he have given himself this epitaph? Would he have said, "Hello, I'm Alfred the Great. It's nice to meet you. What have you got for me?" Would he have really seen himself as this person? And we kind of talked about this beforehand, and we thought maybe, probably not. So where has this come from? And he was quite, apparently, I think, quite modest in his writing. So despite the fact that he's obviously going to some degree make it look like he's working this and it's going really, really well, I don't think it was entirely subjective. So when did he start being called the Great? And I'm going to come back to some of these things as well. But in the Chronicle, it just seems to be, it's definitely something that comes around after his death. It's definitely not something we see in his lifetime. So I've got, and then later writers in the medieval period, Simone of Durham and William of Malmesbury, they described him as Alfred the Wise. He's a very wise man, Alfred the Wise. That's not quite as good as being great, but it's not bad. So in 18th and 19th centuries, he starts to get called the Great. And this is a period where it was like, Britain needs a founding father. And so the Victorians, they like a bit of this, don't we? And so we're starting to see, as we look over time, little bits of this coming together very, very broadly. Now, Philippa talked about this as well last week. Primogeniture was not necessarily the thing, as we've seen it more subsequently. And even now, we still see this, don't we? So the first, or the eldest, in a nutshell, the eldest son becoming the next ruler after you pass away. And so we had a system where the Witan was sort of like the government in each of the areas that you had the rulers over. And they would be who voted in a new king. So it could be if they die suddenly, or you knew this person was going to die imminently, they would be looking at who was going to get made king. So this is obviously really important for somebody like Alfred, because he's looking at this system that's in place, and he has got to align it so that he's going to get that. And if he wants to maintain what he's putting in place, or what he wants to build, or what he's seen go wrong other times, he wants to look at a system. There needs to be a system that we're going to be able to predict who is going to be coming next. And so another, because you had to get in the wit and to step in, another advantage of writing very positively about yourself and your family is that other people would read the positive writings about him, and that would then bring them forward, and they would also want him and his line to become part of this. So you start to see this primogeniture coming in here, where Alfred has found a way to make sure his line carries on. So the first thing, or one of the first things we're seeing, is this concept that he's bringing in to be a little bit more permanent, that you're going to get this line to come through. So we start to see this coming in with Alfred. And he wants to basically turn this unstable system, that it's not necessarily that the Vikings had completely introduced themselves, but this is what we've seen because of the instability that the Viking raids have brought. Again, we need this primogeniture in order to be able to keep this stability and to keep it moving and put it in place, even initially to start with. So you've got all these posh knobs at the top, bad choice of words, the nobility at the top here, and they will start to sort of form over time this new system of power or of government. All right, so in the 860s to the 870s, there is a period of major threat to the country, and we're starting to see the kingdoms really starting to fall under the Vikings. But they head to Wessex. Here we are, we're here, and he goes, no, you out. All right, and he manages to keep them out of Wessex. So what would happen is that you would fight the invaders, and then they would either win, so you would pay them off, which was often what happened, or they would back off. So then you're in the situation where it's just you've got everything back under your control again. And this would happen in all the kingdoms, not just in Wessex. But then what would happen is you just got this circle of things coming round, haven't you? That they'd go, okay, well, you've paid us off, or we're going to have to leave because you've beaten us, so we'll go away. And then we'll get all the winter tides and things out of the way, and the worst of it, and then we'll come back, and the same cycle kind of repeats itself over and over again, really. So this is what you're seeing. But we get now, well, actually, we're fed up with this. We're fed up, the Vikings are saying, of going backwards and forwards all the time. As it happens, what we want to do now is come and we want to settle, and we're going to make this a little bit more difficult for you, really. So you fight them and win, you retreat, and they come back. And they kind of do this, they alternate between England and France. And there's the bit where one Christmas is where he is opposed and he runs away and burns the cakes. But anyway, at that time, he gets together 3 armies, fights the Battle of Edgington against Guthrum and his army, and he wins. I think I maybe needed to have structured this a little bit better, so I'm sorry if I go back on myself. Anyway, the Vikings have the Great Army, also known as the Heathen Army, and in 865, so we've gone back a little bit in time now, this force of around 3,000 men, as I said, arrived on the Isle of Thanet in Kent. If you haven't been there, don't bother. And this time, they were not prepared to be paid off, as I said, with the Danegeld, and they like they're pillaging and they're raiding, but this is it now. They want to settle. They see the benefit of having this land permanently, and they'd organised this fleet of ships. And a series of battles took place over the coming years. And in 871, there were 9 battles between Wessex and the Great Army, which is a lot in a pretty short space of time. This saw the death of Ethelfred of Wessex and Alfred becoming king. So there's been a lot of warfare at this point, and as Kat touched upon last week, obviously, we're seeing all these things. We're seeing still, and sometimes we're not necessarily seeing things across the continent, but there's still a lot of unpleasantness going on, even with the battles between these small groups of what's the word I'm looking for? Not small groups of people, with these small kingdoms, if you like. And in January 878, the Danes struck a surprise attack against Alfred in his winter fortress at Chippenham. And this is when he was forced to flee into exile. He went to the Somerset marshes at Athelney, and he built a fort Like, he has to have this image of him building himself a nice little fort, you know. And in May, he got out the shield wall, out it came, and he defeated Guthrum and the great army at Eddington in Somerset. So all of these things, I know they might not seem directly everything, but all of these things, we see a pattern of how he starts to piece together what it is he is aiming to do. And here's where we see the Alfred jewel come in. Now, if I'd have been clever and a bit less shit, I'd have got you a picture of this, but I haven't. So it is safe to Google the Alfred jewel, okay, because this was found in 1693. So a field was ploughed in North Petherton in Somerset. Obviously, we just mentioned Somerset. This was only a few miles from Althenay Abbey, so the stronghold in the marshes where he launched the counterattack on the elements of the great army of the Danes. And this is absolutely beautiful. This thing, it's going to be quite a large item on its own, but it's really quite exquisite. Oh God, I cannot pronounce this, people. I cannot write this down. Anyway, it's inscribed with something. I can type it somewhere if you want me to, but basically it translates as Alfred ordered me to be made. So it looks like this was in place when they were at this battle or around that time, and maybe came away with it. But it's a piece of Anglo-Saxon goldsmithing made of enamel and quartz enclosed in gold in a tear-shaped slice of rocked crystal. So really quite fancy. And the crystal that it's created this sort of tear-shaped thing, and there's a figure sitting inside, which is obviously him looking very kingy and stuff like that. And it has a small socket, so probably what they think would have happened, there was like some sort of rod, probably made of ivory, which would have been inserted, the rod would have been inserted into the open space at the bottom. And yes, so some of the manuscripts that he'd had sent round the kingdom, this may have been used as some sort of pointer called an astel, and then the pointer would be used to follow the text. So as he was out and he was, I don't know if you want to call it preaching, teaching, anything like Cat's done it, look, anything like that, then that could have been used. So you can see this, and I'm pointing at the screen like you can see me want it. Anyway, I'm going down here. So it seems likely that it was one of these, and it is currently in the wonderful Ashmolean Museum. So that's a really nice bit of oh, there it is. Look, this is even better now. Look, this is really weak on my part. But
I took this. It is amazing in real life. It is absolutely.
So, Philippa, you took it. Can you show us with like, or can you give us a description? If you were to put this next to, I don't know, a fizzy drink can, how big would it be?
It's okay. It's probably about as big as this rock. So no size, maybe. It's not okay. Massive. I think it makes sense that it was something that was this. I'm going to show you a side photo as well, because that you can actually see Alfred. Wow. And then obviously the inscription continues on, like Catherine says, and translates into Alfred ordered me made, something like that. Yeah, so it makes sense that it would be some kind of pointer, something like that. You know, remembering his scholarly, you know, he likes to read, write, whatever. So yeah. But yeah, it's absolutely.
In some ways, like it being small like that, it makes the detail work even more impressive. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Pretty pick banana for scale. Well, pretty pick, as you know, as we all know, bananas can vary greatly in both length and curvature. So it's what you do at the counts, though. The best way to measure something by. Yes, so people are obviously commenting on how beautiful that is, and it really is. And obviously the location of finding it really sort of puts in place the battle and the victory gained by Alfred and why that was there, because obviously when he was in exile, he would have still been writing, possibly teaching, translating scriptures and all things like this. And maybe there were still people that were being able to bring him things backwards and forwards, and we don't necessarily know at this point. But obviously it's a beautiful item to have been recovered. And when we get it's like with any battlefield, really, when you recover an item at that site, it really does help to bring and seal in what you know may or may have not have happened at a certain location. So they had, like, Bosworth is a really good one where they thought they found it, built all the stuff there. Oh no, it's somewhere else. Because when they did all the surveying and things like that, they found the shots, they found the boar badge that would have been worn by somebody in the nobility, so they could pin it much better there. So finding something at what you think is a battlefield site, sometimes you do know, but or you're fairly confident, finding something like that can really underpin that sort of that knowledge. And I've looked at lots of pictures. I've not seen it, but yeah, I mean, it looks absolutely beautiful. Really
He must have been gutted when he lost it. That's what I think.
Yeah.
He would have noticed that he'd have lost that. The other thing that's just occurred to me when you said that is we don't actually know when anything was dropped. It
could have been. He could have just been out for a walk.
He could have gone back there if it's somewhere that he, it was his special place. It'd been his sort of place he'd hidden out. And was it found near where he was hiding during that?
Yeah, it was like on the battlefield, I think. Hang on a minute, let me go back.
Melissa asked a question: was Alfred referred to as king in contemporary sources? And what I would say is it would be in either Old English or Latin, presumably, but there are charters that refer to him as King of the Anglo-Saxons. My assumption is that it's not actually in the text the word king, but it's something that translates to king.
I think so. Because there's a differentiation between petty kings and and kings, as far as I understand.
Right. Okay, so what did Alfred do with all these experiences and observations and all of these types of things that he'd gone through? So here is where he starts to put things together, and we see him come to the fore, and we see the man, we start to see the man that the other ladies have discussed, and perhaps we know, and these are the things that perhaps give him this legacy of being great. So in the 890s, the conflict was still raging in all the kingdoms, and one of the things he did in fighting between them and fighting Saxons is he developed this standing army, but also a fleet of ships. So he is being given some credit by some people with kind of introducing the first navy of sorts. Now, I think opinion is divided on how successful and good this was at the time, but it did have advantages. It did prove some benefit. And it's like many of the things he did, it set a sort of a precedent and gave an idea for things that were capitalized on and still used in the future and even to today. He sorts out his admin. So one of the things that you would quite often see with warfare in the sort of, well, even before the medieval period, whoever it was against, is that something happens, you send everyone out you go, like in the mid-70s with the unions, everybody out. So everybody goes out and they all do the fighty warry thing. A lot of them die. Obviously, they are injured. They can't come back to support their families. Nothing has been farmed. Nothing has, so you come back. So you've had the decimation out there and then you come back to a mess. So one of the things he did was say, okay, what we need to do is we need to kind of revolve this. So he tried to do it so that even when there had to be some people fighting, that there still had to be some people working the lands. And in a quieter period, you would have a lot of people maybe working the lands and doing those more practical things, but you would still have a presence, really, a military presence, so that people were aware that you were there. So we kind of had these things on a kind of a balance or a rotational system to try and cover all the bases all of the time. Kat talked about how he built the burhs or the boroughs. There were 33 and we still have some of them. Winchester kind of obviously being the one we talk about a lot here and the most famous one. So these were small fortified settlements. They weren't forts, they were fortified settlements. And in these areas there were people and there were traders. So you were kind of giving them this safe land and base to work from. They were trading centres, and it meant that people could travel to and from them much more easily to trade than before. And this really does give people a chance to feel prosperous, but it also gives them a sense of belonging in a way. They have something to protect and defend, and this is what they start to do and what they want to do. So you're giving people, it's giving them, and sort of Kat talked earlier about this sense of nationality and pride and belonging in that, and that all feeds in again to this sense of what Alfred wants to do, to build one kingdom, it was sort of one England. And then the power can be moved around through these boroughs as well, boroughs, whatever you want to call them, and it's easy for people to come to each other's military aid and all of things like this, and this sense of Englishness and economic stability which benefits everybody. And then literacy, so he argued that part of English, the literacy in England or the kingdoms, had been destroyed by the Vikings, and I think that was fairly true. So he wants to put things into English, and obviously we see this again during the Reformation, don't we? This thing that if you put things into English, then people aren't just having these things lectured to them, they can understand them properly and live them properly. So he's saying he wants things to be put into English, not just into Latin, so that anyone can read them. I don't know what's giving me feedback. Is anyone else getting some feedback off of it? I don't know why, because it wasn't there to start with, and now it's suddenly, oh no, it's gone again. Okay.
Yeah.
Does he mean everyone when he says this, or is he talking about
I say everybody. I think he's just probably trying to increase this within the people that you need it to have increasing. I don't know how far down the social strata
certainly in
this to go.
I think I thought it was concentrated, and I could be wrong, but more around like the monastic institutions, because there was a big concern that with Viking raids and a lot of killing of monks, that there'd been literally a wipeout of people who could read, write, you know, and were learned, and that therefore there was this huge gap in ability, because you can get more monks, but if weren't the same caliber, they didn't have the same
monk,
you know, because they weren't they hadn't had the education. There's people there to educate them, and anyway, so there was a degradation in the
I'm not sure really how far down he wanted this or expected this to filter. I suppose I think he realistically wouldn't have expected it to go that far down and that far wide, but I think he just felt that it had been generally neglected, and even if he kept everything just in Latin, it wouldn't, there were a number of people that would preach in Latin or write in Latin, but maybe he just felt this would open it up to a wider audience.
I think that's certainly one of the problems of that was discussed in later years, both with the Wycliffites or Lollards going into the Reformation and those kinds of questions across Europe, was the fact that priests were being trained in Latin and were preaching by rote, but were not able to translate.
Didn't know what.
And if you can't translate the text, you can't actually preach. Really.
So it's kind of that sort of same premise I've got here. He started translating Psalms into English. So well, what would have the church made of that? Really, it's difficult to say, isn't it? He set up a school at court as well, so I suppose that's coming down into looking at different generations and groups of people. If you're, I don't know, maybe people that wouldn't, I don't know exactly who went to this school, but maybe they wouldn't have been people that would have been given that opportunity if he hadn't have done that. I can't really, I've got the inference that it was that, but I couldn't say that for definite.
When you're bringing schools and because the Charlemagne way was kind of monastic schools, and then there's this notion of a court school, but there is an implication that within that court school, it's not just nobles, it's other children too. So I'm wondering if that is children who have shown some kind of aptitude, almost, I mean, it's not a grammar school, but it sounds like it's operating like a grammar school. And Pretty Pick says, talking about we need high quality monks. And the thing is that for much of the history of these islands, you did, because monks were your medical system,
Mm.
Monks were your teachers. Monks were lawyers, or people within the church were lawyers, because when you go to university and study law, it's canon and civil law. They are joint. And so frequently lawyers are churchmen in some way, shape, or form. So that is the law, medicine, of course, theology, and then education on top of that. So monks are the people who are writing the history. Sometimes they are moving science forward. They are also going out. Some of them are soldiers, and they're going out and protecting people on the way to the Holy Land. They're doing everything, all of it,
All of it.
all of it.
All of
So
it.
it's a much more, I think it's a much more widespread calling with various vocations contained within it, if that makes sense.
So yeah, I've got he set up at school at court. His own men are educated, and he wants and improving the overall standard of education. But he was also bringing in people from Europe into all these things as well, and that helped the nation to be seen as more educated, more stable, which of course all feeds into this sense of unity and how people will view you from the outside as a bigger force to be reckoned with, really, I suppose. And so he wanted to bring the idea that everyone should be able to understand. And like you said about preaching, Philippa, it's a question of even if you can't necessarily read and write yourself, at least if the person preaching to you can preach to you in English, you might have a bit more of a chance.
I'm wondering whether a lot of this does whether this has a lot to do with converting or just keeping that the Christianity element really. I mean, he was incredibly, what I suppose we'd call pious. I'm not sure what they would have sort of seen it as then, dedicated. Apart from the shagging, incredibly sort of dedicated to Christianity and the adoption of it throughout. Of course, you need language for that, a language that the people you're converting understand.
Yeah.
I mean, in fairness to him as a shagger, there were numerous bishops, archbishops, cardinals, and for that matter, popes.
He probably wasn't
massive fucking alone, was he? Well, no, he wasn't, because he was shagging everybody. But he wasn't alone in his naughtiness.
No, he was in very good, frequently papal company.
Yes.
Maybe that's where he learned it. He'd met the Pope twice before he was 6, so
maybe that inspired him. I'm not quite sure what that Pope's history. Did that Pope have?
No, I don't know. I shouldn't disparage.
I would probably walk away from this now. Actually,
look,
he lived a very long time ago.
Naughty popes. Sometimes
they're all a bit naughty.
They're all a bit naughty.
Isn't it? I mean, what's more naughty than going, do you know what? We'll this new religion seems to be catching on. I tell you what, we'll make ourselves the head of it, even though we used to kill them. Anyway.
Yeah, and we'll be a bit naughty on the side. Anyway, yes, so he has lots of correspondence with monks, back to monks again in Europe and the papacy. And we start to build the international relations to help work together against the Vikings. And Kat talked about the lawmaking and so forth. And so again, we're looking at how we see him start to set new precedents with the value of lawmaking and administration, and showing how you need these things to properly govern a nation, to make it strong and stable. If you were hanging around in politics a few years ago, you'd have been sick of hearing that. So yes, strong and stable. So you're seeing him sort of really putting together what he wanted to be perceived as a strong nation, the best way to govern, present to the outside that you were infallible, but it did have the benefit of actually doing the things, I think, for the best part that he was trying to create the image of, and people saw the value in this. So additionally, I think with the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, I see that as part of his legacy, and it all ties into what we were talking about just now with education, is it gives rise to other people starting to think that these type of records and descriptions are actually quite valuable. So I think more people possibly started to do the same thing that maybe not would have done to the same extent if he hadn't have sort of set a precedent. So other records may not have been as stringent, but they started to be there a little bit more. That's information that we wouldn't have had. We talk again about this helping to increase literacy. And although we have obviously a lot of more information because of that and because of Asa, about him, how he, I don't know what to call it, governing or ruling or leading somewhere, we have again that information. It can help us as long as we're sensible to perhaps fill in some gaps, make some suggestions, and see how the other scarcer bits of information that we have about other medieval rulers around this time might have fitted together. So we can expand a little bit on what he's given us before and after, as long as you're careful with it, obviously. And so much, I think, of what we've seen in the centuries that follow, even today with the structure of the burghs and things like that, and how to govern centrally, how, you know, how a system of rules and things and laws are important, I think was shaped by him really, and these early premises, and how he changed things, how he planned, and even right up to today. And I think you could argue that the creation of unions, and I mean in a wider sense, countries or nations and things like that, is still seen by a lot of people as being beneficial because of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, essentially. So I know this one is hotly debated, but I think one of the premises, and I'm not debating so with the EU, is that, you know, you come together and you can give each other things, you can be stronger and you can build each other up. I know not everyone agrees with that. I'm just saying that it's a premise that a lot of people feel that unity gives you strength together. And so he sort of broke the cycle a little bit of everybody sort of thing, you know, we're better off on our own, no, come together, we can defend the country, we can benefit each other a bit more. And we look back, don't we, and we praise previous leaders who have been able to break struggles. So I thought we talked the other week about William Marshall under the protectorship of Henry III. So he was able to start to rebuild the breakdown between the monarchy and the barons. So bringing in unity, bringing it back together, breaking the cycles of warfare and arguing and sort of disagreement. We look to Edward IV for all his other thoughts. You know, he was seen as a peacemaker during the Wars of the Roses. There was a lot of unrest, but there were protracted periods in the Wars of the Roses where Edwards was able to bring peace. And then you look at Henry Tudor again, you know, it didn't just end at Bosworth like people sometimes think, but he was seen as uniting York and Lancaster. So there's this history of people doing what Alfred did, which was trying to create union and stop warfare.
Yeah, I mean, he was operating in a period where half the country was dominated by Vikings, and I wonder how successful he would have been had that threat not ramped up.
Yes.
You know, from raids to actually, no, they're going to come and settle.
Yeah. He did what he used wouldn't really have had a place, would it, as much?
No, it would have looked very self-serving, I think. Whereas with the Viking threat, he absolutely had a cause to unite everyone behind. But I would say he seems to be perhaps the first person to really have, or ruler to have, a very long-term view. He was putting things in place.
Yes. I was coming to that
generation. Okay.
So what Philippa said, really. Now, as always, when someone is either great in some capacity, people will exploit that financially as much as possible. The Victorians particularly loved a bit of this. So part of legacy that we tend to look at is also things like what has been spawned in interest. So one of the oldest, Philippa sent me onto this text, one of the oldest pubs in the world is in Wessex. It's a memorial to him. There's a school named after him in Wantage, where he was born. A statue of him erected in there in 1876. In 1793, Alfred's Head was opened. This is the pub by John and Elizabeth Stevens, who were very, very proud of themselves. And on the 17th of September, it wasn't just opened, there was a concert and there was a ball for the ladies, and it's still there. It's still operating as a public house and a restaurant.
Maybe that's where we should go for our next Had Do.
There we go. See?
I like it.
He was still popular in the 18th century. So this is really nice. On the 1st of August 1740, in what must have been a really fun birthday party for a 3-year-old, Frederick, Prince of Wales, celebrated the 3rd birthday of his daughter by staging a masque at Cliveden, which is his posh seat in Buckinghamshire. And the extravaganza was a musical extravaganza entitled Alfred. So that must have been lots of fun. But it concluded with the newly penned piece Royal Britannia. So again, they loved it. They really saw this. They had him as a symbol of nationalism and great leadership, and it's something that we could all come together under. But there over time have been so many, but especially under the Georgians and the Victorians.
They must have had him down as a navy. They must have given a lot of credence to that part of the story then.
They did.
Britannia rules the waves, isn't it?
Yeah, I think probably a bit more than was really justified, to be honest. But yeah, so we had statues, plays, poems, songs, talks, fiction, non-fiction books, you name it, statues. There was a bit of all of this about Alfred again and again and again, just loads of it. In 1901, the Earl of Rosebery unveiled a statue in Winchester, which they said marked what they thought was the 1000th anniversary of his death. And it said Alfred was Alfred the Good, Alfred the Truth Teller, Alfred the father of his country and of ours.
Wow.
So it's hard to say how much of this attitude towards him was fashion in this period, or the patriotism that the Georgians and the Victorians wanted. And as we know with the Victorians, they adapt so much of history to their own versions of things and what they want to project in all forms of fashion, literature, everything, basically, artwork. And these romantic notions very much have shaped until more recently, I think, when people have started going, I'm not sure about that. But he was not known as Alfred the Great until 3 centuries afterwards, when a chronicler called Matthew Paris used the term Alfred the Great, and he claimed it had been commonly used to describe Alfred, but nobody else could really find
it down.
So but it wasn't seen again. There was 1709 biography entitled Alfred the Great. But we still see, and the Last Kingdom being mine and Philippa's favourite example, the books, TV shows, films, etc., that we see him in today. So I think, though, in terms of how great he was, once a reputation is assigned, it's very hard to shift. So we see Henry V as this great military leader, and who was just fabulous in every way as a military man. But actually, he committed some extremely unchivalrous acts with the murders of the hostages that he took. We say Richard III is evil in every capacity, but to be fair, he was probably no better or worse than any other king in the medieval period. You could say Charles I's vanity destroyed the monarchy. Oliver Cromwell was only a hypocrite. Victoria and Albert have the greatest love story. So I think once you get this sort of reputation, it sticks, whether or not it's true, and we pick people to pieces more. So has Alfred the Great just had this reputation? We just assume he's great. And I think it's hard to say how many negative attributes he had. I think the Navy thing, as we said, is a bit exaggerated. And obviously Kat talked about how much he was playing the religion card in order to exacerbate his own importance in terms of his leadership and manipulating that. But it's hard to say, because the sources that we have are him writing about himself, and of course Asa, who was so far up his arse you could see out of his mouth. So it's a little bit like we don't have many people that are talking more negatively about him. And is that because there isn't anything, or is that because the sources that we have don't give us that? But I would say that he made a great deal of improvements. He put a lot of structures into places, things that were continually used effectively. He left a form of stability for his children and his grandchildren to move forward with in the same way. And that's no mean feat. And he did all this, of course, with his bum grapes, amongst other things. So it's harder to do stuff when I think you're suffering with your health. So I don't know if you want to argue that Alfred was Alfred the Great, but I think Alfred was pretty great.
I think. Well, I mean, we of course we have the written record. So actually what we don't have is context around, we just don't have that much detail around what everyone else did. So who knows? I think even afterwards. And there's gaps, of course, in his record when Asser's not writing.
Yes, sorry, when he was, especially when he was in exile. That's just not there, is it?
It's not there.
It's like it never happened.
Well, which is of course why it opened itself up to having extra bits added later on and embellished. I'm inclined to think that I don't think everything was being written down as a matter of PR. It would have been incredibly new. He to me, he just seems like someone who thought, like, let's write this down. We should. Like, why do people sketch? Why do people ever sketch a landscape?
I think I think with the Chronicle,
because he doesn't write that.
That's
like
him
writing it.
In the sense that it was obviously very, like you were saying, he's the best at everything in the whole world. Yes. But obviously there were times when it was very, very detailed. And there were times
about him as a child. He's not. So he's writing that when Alfred is a fully
grown.
No,
I'm talking about the aspect of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Obviously, there was times when there was a lot of detail and times when there was less. So I think all I would say with that was to consider that when there was a bit less, it's like everything. When I say it was like a PR thing, obviously some of it was very this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and this, and that's like a trail of facts, like you say.
This isn't a record that's repeated. This isn't written out and sent around the kingdoms. That's what I don't understand about the PR argument. No one else is seeing this.
About what I think the PR argument is only one part of it. It's just one thing that has been discussed about it, is that because that we don't know so much what was not put in. When anybody writes anything, they choose what they're going to put in and what they're going to leave out. So that's in terms of the PR argument, that is just something to consider.
Yeah, I think that most of the spin that goes on in later centuries, much later centuries, and the principal spin doctors of the Alfred Legacy, in a way that I think makes us question his veracity. For that, I actually blame the Victorians, because they are the ones that I blame the Victorians for a lot of things, because they use him for their own, frankly, fucking nefarious ends of world domination and misery spreading. And so it's very hard for me when I came to Alfred. His legacy was utterly, and my impression of him was utterly coloured by the Victorian presentation of him, of this sort of nationalistic hope that frankly gave me the ick. And looking into him, I'm like, oh, hang on a minute. This is not what I thought it was. So in many ways, the Victorians spoiled my impression of him, because I was like, ugh, it's another jingoistic fucking drummer beat bullshit that's because
I mean, it's like I said, I think the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is invaluable. It's just such, however much anybody might think, it was just something that we'd never had. I think it set a precedent. It's fascinating. We said, he wouldn't have called himself Alfred the Great in his own time. I really think that he genuinely thought that he was acting for good and he was trying to create something, and something strong, something positive. Obviously he had the Christianity agenda, but he believed fervently in that for the good of people. He wanted to spread it for the right reasons, and I just feel that the things he did really came from a good place. And like you say, he had that vision that he was able to project forward, and that worked.
It had just been very unsafe for a very long time. And I can't see that any leader would not be looking to find a way to stabilise. But he
where other people hadn't managed to.
That was able to achieve it.
Intelligence level, that maybe that vision, that ability to think beyond your own lifetime. Perhaps because he ended up, he watched the reigns of his father and three brothers, you know, I don't know, maybe that gave him some sort of
He
perspective
just
on
sort of
what
looked
happened.
at it and thought, what's come before hasn't worked. And I think by getting Guthrum to convert to Christianity, it then gave him the same problem. Oh, now I've done this and I've got my own kingdom. Now I'm faced with the problem that I was the problem, and now I'm faced with that problem myself. So he said, we can't just keep paying these people off. We've got to find a way to stop this same cycle of them just coming in, and we beat them back. And then, of course, we're losing men. We're losing, they can't, then we don't have people creating all the other things we need, the food and stuff. We need to stop that cycle. We need to stop paying them off. They're coming over and they're going to keep taking and taking and taking. We're going through this same cycle. We need to break that cycle. And he broke that cycle.
Well,
so, and that's no,
unfortunately, he couldn't live forever, and it didn't last forever. But...
Yeah, I can't remember who said it. I saw up the chat a mention that clerical celibacy, or rather, priests not being allowed to have families, isn't really a thing until after 1066. And I just want to clarify that while within like ecclesiastical synods and councils, it isn't confirmed that that is the way going forward until 1100 and something. Discussion about clerical celibacy, the expectation, or at least the preference for clerical celibacy, is arguably biblical, and is certainly being suggested, discussed in the 2nd century. It comes up at the Council of Nicaea, albeit it's proposed that clerical celibacy should be put forward at the Council of Nicaea. That is not agreed to, but they also talk about who women church people are allowed to live with, and that is like your mother, your sister, your aunt. No one you should be diddling, put it that way. So while it's not explicitly stated that priests must be celibate to be or churchmen must be celibate to be churchmen, it's also certainly the preference and expectation from biblical text.
There you go. Cool. Someone also said in the comments that the Normans came eventually, so actually the Vikings were obviously the Normandy being Northmen, Vikings who had gone into Normandy, settled there and come over. So yeah, I suppose they did manage it in the end.
It just took a bit. It wasn't part of the initial plan, but they worked around it.
They took a detour and
what was it? Something adapt, something else. I can't remember. Yeah, absolutely. Something adapt and overcome. There you go. Was it rejection is redirection?
Yeah, Melissa saying the celibacy is all down to Paul. Yeah, I mean, that's where it comes, like biblically, St. Paul talking about that. But then, to be fair, that's also a discussion that's based upon a belief, or arguably based on the belief that the second coming of Christ is going to be sooner rather than later. So that's perhaps a further reaching celibacy, that there's perhaps a preference for everybody to be celibate to await the coming of Christ.
You better come quick then.
Yeah.
If everyone's celibate, no one's going to be coming quick.
Yeah, they
anyway.
Yeah.
So cool. That's Alfred, as Philippa said in the tagline. So great, we had to do him twice.
Do him over 2 weeks.
That is so much. So, but I think I quite like him.
He's a visionary.
Indeed.
He's actually, through doing this, he has actually become possibly the historical figure that I respect the most.
I think it's incredibly foresight.
Yeah.
Foresightful. If I made up a word, but you understand what I mean.
We do.
And maybe that's why he's inspired. And of course, with any historical figure, people who people who pick them out, whether it's a figure or something like the Magna Carta, they pick it out and they pick it up for their own ends.
Yeah.
And the Victorians were odd, but then they,
But entertaining in a bad way.
they brought a lot of things back because they're promoting tourism. They've got a weekend, or they've got days off now. They've got a little bit of spare money in their pocket. They want to go places, and these places need stories attached to them.
Yeah, they fucked around with the tower, the buildings of the tower, and the stories of the tower.
They took Richard III's feet. I don't forgive them for that.
They pulled down parts of Kenilworth Castle to make it more romantic. They nabbed stuff off the Boscobel Oak, so it died.
Yeah. Were they one of the people that poked around? No, I won't. I was going to say poked around in Catherine Parr. I didn't.
Oh, I can't remember what year.
No, I'm not sure.
Was that Georgian? It was not. It was late. It was close to Victorian.
Okay, I'm a bit premature. Okie dokie.
We can still blame them.
Start to develop then. Yeah, like you say.
I mean, also they definitely poked around in some pharaohs.
They did.
Bloody buggers they were, weren't they? But Tower Bridge is cool.
Yeah, they did some good stuff. They made very nice pumping stations.
They did.
They did. They made beautiful buildings, regardless of their purpose. Much better than
the Natural History Museum, beautiful.
Palace.
That Crystal Palace. And also, I think there's one thing about the Victorians that we can learn a lot from. They did death really well.
Yeah,
like
seances.
They did do, but then they went a bit too far. I mean, the Albert Memorial is a flatting eyesore.
She went too far.
She got overexcited and she started showing off. That shit.
She got tired. Got a bit overexcited.
I mean, so much of Albertopolis is cool. The V&A, Natural History Museum, Science Museum, Royal Albert Hall, very cool. Albert Memorial, no thanks.
It looks like it's been dropped. It looks like a really elaborate trophy that's like
Julesy, she didn't do the Brighton Pavilion. That was Dirty George, the Prince Regent. He is responsible for that fucking insane, amazingly cool place. Victoria inherited it, and she was like, the people are too close to me and they keep looking at my face. I'm going to sell the Brighton Pavilion to the people of Brighton. So if you live in Brighton and Hove, actually, then you are a council taxpayer and you have your council tax document, you get a discount if you go into the Brighton Pavilion. And if you live in Brighton currently and are a Brighton and Hove council taxpayer and you've not yet taken advantage of that, you should. Because that place is absolutely batshit and it's really cool.
It is.
It's really cool.
I need to go there again, actually. It's just a very long way.
Melissa, I have asked her. She's got to give me her reply.
I'm thinking about it. Look, my hatred of the Victorians means I'm probably not the best person to speak about
it. It's going to be 45 minutes of ranting.
Yeah. me having a meltdown about a historical time period is not an appropriate conference talk.
No, I know.
Therapist and for History After Dark. That's the two places that can come out. So
there you go.
I'll have to see if I can control myself.
Well, you could do a piece on like how the Victorians have reconstructed history.
I can't do that because I can't control myself. I can't control myself. The problem.
Melissa, I'd pay double to see that. There you go.
They did a lot of good stuff.
Even the dog's leaving. The dog's going, absolutely fuck this. I'm not getting involved.
Yeah, where is he? I don't know.
He's left. He's left. He's kicking off. I'm leaving.
I'm done.
He's probably wanting to go out. Right then, shall we?
Philippa, what's happening next week?
Next week we're on to H, which means we went for Princess Charlotte.
Can you guess why?
Can you guess why?
The the rose of the Hanoverians.
The hope of Hanover. There's
Hanoverians.
2 H's.
Yeah, 2 H's. Yeah.
2 H's, in fact.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's
So-
cracking off with this?
Don't know what the fuck we're doing. Stop messing.
Everything. My ropey shoulder really hurts.
So we're going to be talking about Charlotte, and then after that, am I correct that that is how the alphabet works, and then it's a roundup week?
It is a roundup week.
Cool. I know how the alphabet works.
Yes. And counting.
Those are 2 things that are hard.
They are hard.
And you get to do jingles as well for roundup week.
Yeah.
So we're going to do the delightful Charlotte, and then we're going to have a roundup, and then maybe a shenanigan.
Maybe
Yeah.
a shenanigan. Yeah. Quite
So that's
probably.
coming up fairly shortly.
Oh, we had a rant actually. Maybe we can do a rant week because we had a rant.
The Victorians.
No, we'll have to keep it as a surprise.
Yes.
Surprise rant.
Surprise rant.
Surprise rant. Okay, so thank you all very much for coming down. We hope you have enjoyed 2 bits of Alfred. And I don't know what you think about Alfred, but I think we rather like him. I think he's going to do well.
I think he might do well. Yeah.
I think he's gonna do very well. I think he's a contender.
I think he's an impressive individual, and I like impressive individuals.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot to be admired. I think also he's not like massive. He does all this stuff, and he's not massively old when he passes away. If I'm correct, he's just turned 50.
Yeah, 51.
So there's all this stuff done, and he's just barely 50.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, added to that is pretty cool. But yeah, thank you if you've been watching along live. We appreciate it. If you are watching on the playback, thank you very much. And please make sure you have subscribed to the channel. If you also hit the bell icon next to the subscribe button and then select all, YouTube claims that is how they will notify you of when we're next scheduled to go live. It doesn't always work. And sometimes they unsubscribe against your will. So if you would like more information about us, then you can come over to our Substack. Things will be happening there. That is...
Did I even do it? Oh, yes, I did.
That is historyafterdarkhub.substack.com. Also, if you like what you see and you would like to support us with a Winnebago, or if you would like to join our close friends on Instagram, what close friends is it's basically where Catherine goes out in the world and finds horrifically depraved memes, usually
No,
about
the hedgehog thing wasn't depraved. It was
no,
just
all cute, but lots of depraved ones. There's frequently things about people's beavers that come up, and she'll put that on close friends.
What have we started following?
actual beavers. But
Yeah, what if we started following Beaver Lover or something? What have we started following? Anyway,
the Beaver Institute.
So if you come over to, if you go to www.buymeacoffee.com/had podcast, you can buy us Winnebagos, and also you can come over and be part of our close friends. We have also got merch. I showed you the mug earlier. We've got Timmy's a Problem mugs. It's also on other merch. We've got History After Dark hoodies and T-shirts, which I can see the tip of the microphone. She's got a tip out that Philippa is gorgeously modelling. We've got sliders that say no feet for free on the internet. And we have also got Rough Beaver merch. So come on, roll up, get your Rough Beavers here. Anything else I need to say?
No.
Right.
I think you've covered the bases.
In which case, we will see you all next week for fun and frolics with the tragic Charlotte. I'm going to count us out. Until then, all take care of yourselves. Thanks for joining us. And we're going to go in 3, 2, 1. Bye.